Good afternoon, traders. It is Sunday, the 25th of July, 2021, and I'm speaking to you today from London in the United Kingdom, and there are thunderstorms and lightning happening outside, so if you do hear that in the background, I apologize. For me, it's a very soothing sound. So having a look at the week ahead in terms of high impact news, really most of my focus will be around the FOMC statement, just in terms of that potentially adding some increased volatility, and also how it could potentially start to impact dollar strength pretty much kind of across the board if that's going to be the case. I might subsequently also keep an eye on, say, CAD GDP, for example, but most of it this week, this really seems to be the one that's going to catch my eye the most in terms of what could create disruption in the markets. If I also take a look at the currency strength and weakness kind of weighting here, what I really want to highlight in addition is that although dollar is hinting at a little bit of kind of numerical strength, it's very, very small. GBP as well, tiny sort of small amount. There's a little bit of yen weakness, a little bit of gold strength, a little bit of euro weakness, and mainly Aussie weakness. Okay, so my point here is that this is relatively unusual. Most of these are somewhat flat or just leaning slightly one way over another, and that's not really ideal for good moves in the market. One subsequent upside to that might be that the markets then do kick off, and by the end of the week these conditions have changed, but this is currently what that daily sentiment is looking like, and it just doesn't really bode well for strong trends and high probability opportunities. Onto the currency market, starting off with the dollar index. So we have indeed made our way up to 93, almost managed to break through. However, we pulled back into the moving averages outside of this little range, found some support there, and are pushing on to 93. Now, so one of the things that I do want to mention, of course, is that it is largely range bound on the monthly, and that looks a little bit more obvious on the euro chart, which we'll have a look at in a moment. But it is, what I do want to keep in mind is that 93 level could indeed present some difficulty in breaking through, and therefore it is possible. I have to consider the possibility that prices are potentially likely to head lower this week, that it could head back down towards 92, and therefore there could be dollar weakness this week. It's possible, but what I'd really like to see, obviously ideally here, is to see it break above, find support on 93 and continue onwards, and then therefore find the markets a little bit closer to 93.50 or even 94 towards the end of the week. What I really want, I don't really care which way they go, I just want some good strong trends with high probability money making opportunities. So the reason I mentioned that might not necessarily continue on in the direction, if we look here at euro dollar on the daily, it is in a downtrend, but just look at the kind of price action effectively putting on the brakes. It's kind of had big strong moves, shallower retracements, then sort of smaller moves with deeper retracements, and effectively that motion has been slowing down, and therefore it's now starting to put on the brakes, even though Thursday's candle was nice and bearish. It didn't really close near the lows. And there's a lot to be said for price action when it's not closing near the lows here. You can kind of see there's obviously clearly a lot of buyers here starting to push back up, and therefore, yes, there is a possibility the market could push higher this week. And I think that would potentially stem from the dollar rather than from the euro. But that is something I need to be prepared for. It's unusual. We're on a range, and therefore it makes more sense to me for us to head down to the bottom, test the range, and then decide what we want to do. So I'm leaning 55 to the downside and 45 taking into account the possibility that the brakes are coming on here, and therefore there could potentially just be a breakout where the market moves, and that might be triggered, for example, by FOMC on Wednesday, or we could get pushed to the upside. It just means caution. There's definitely something going on here. This trend is not as strong as it was, and therefore I'm more cautious on it. Which brings me to sterling. Looking at that, and as I said, there's a little bit of strength on that. The trick here, or the difficulty here, is there's an uptrend on that monthly with that candle really relatively incomplete at the moment. There's also a bullish red candle as well coming back into this level of support, but that looks relatively bullish. Okay, we are on a downtrend, lower highs, lower lows with a bullish finish to it. I mean, buyers pushing back up there. That looking a little bit bullish within an uptrend, and then just highlighting this downtrend where prices coming back up into previous market structure, and that there is actually an inside red candle here with a bit of a sort of bullish, call it inside candle there. Okay, so this, what I'm going to be looking for here this week is to see if we get a break below the low of this and a continuation to the downside. So in isolation, this would normally continue down, but because of the other conflicting information, I'm just extra cautious. It wouldn't surprise me at all, for example, if Monday we push back up above this level, but there could also be a series of inside candles just showing a bit of a consolidation ahead of a breakout. So I am extra cautious with that. Aussie dollar, which is now the weakest of the bunch, this I might be looking at. Again, this is a bearish indecision candle inside indecision candle, and therefore yes, there is a fair possibility that this could decide to head lower. It is coming back into recent market structure on the lower time frames. It is above a weekly support level, so again contradicting information. Downtrend here, strong resistance up here, pushing back down. This is an area where there are both buyers below and sellers above, and so this is why it's a little bit tricky. So I'm going to be looking for this to break lower this week, which would support the idea of dollar strength. I'm just highlighting in isolation. This would normally be a really nice short setup, but it's sitting right close to a key level. And so far, you know, kind of MACD's trending lower, so that's nice and bearish, and RSI is neutral. Not really giving a lot away. So just cautious on that one, but I would be looking to short that. Then moving on to Kiwi against the US dollar. So this one, again, you can see here, looking at a lot of buyers pushing back up there, putting on the brakes, again, starting to look quite strong. There's a bit of an indecision. There's a nice little doji candle forming there, and off a strong monthly level, off a round number. And so a push higher would make sense. It is stuck between these kind of weekly levels here and a monthly level, so it is all over the place. Incredibly tricky, I think, for intraday trading opportunities, and of course it could push higher. So again, cautious there, because that hinting at that possibility, if it does push higher, then that is dollar weakness. So that, again, all over the place, contradicting the Aussie dollar, US dollar version of this. Now moving on to dollar yen, which has produced this bullish candle. So as a general rule, dollar yen is junk to trade. And because it really does abide by its own rules, and does a lot more random behavior than some of the other charts. But this one having produced a bullish candle here off levels of support off the previous lows, and actually almost very close to breaking these highs, implies that it's going to attempt to push a little bit higher. Danger there, I think that's going to be quite tricky to trade. Then looking at dollar Swissy. So dollar Swissy here, just this a complete mess. Very much so looking at it on the weekly, it's pushing down a little bit here, indecision candles, hovering around this weekly level, not really giving much clarity. It's got a higher low. On this one, it has broken this downtrend of lower highs. We came back up here. Here we broke this, so this downtrend is not to be included within this. It's not really worthwhile. Here at this point, we've got if you want to say a high, a low, and a high and a higher low. So therefore, this is more bullish than bearish. So we'll see how that goes. Again, it's got to push its way through that. Also, very cautious if there are going to be any trading opportunities on that. Leading to another conflicting chart. So it's very frustrating when this can happen. Really, what you do in these situations, or how I approach this in the week coming, is that clarity could well reveal itself during the week, and therefore that's what I'll be watching these charts for. Dollar CAD here having this trend to the upside, but it's now on the underside, now showing the possibility that it wants to continue to the downside. Sort of a little bit of a bearish candle, not super bearish. I would say it's more bearish than bullish, obviously, but I wouldn't say it was a very heavy candle. I would have been interested if it had closed below this monthly support resistance level, but it hasn't. So that's also what I'll be looking for, to see if we see a break of that and head back below that level, because that would then imply the momentum might carry it a little bit further down, but otherwise it's got an uptrend on the daily. So really this week is which way are things going to go? Are they going to climb higher, or they're going to head lower? So really tricky there. Now moving on to the currency pairs of interest. So here I really see, so just to sum up, I beg your pardon, on the dollar pairs on the majors, is really just caution. There's a couple there, as I said. There's Aussie dollar short, dollar CAD possibly long. The rest I'll be very cautious on. There's no clear signal coming from. Then having a look here on the currencies of interest, on the Euro Aussie, pull back into the previous highs here, potential bullish inside candle. That could be a nice long position, and again there's some strong resistance up here, so that'll be a little bit short-lived, and this candle looking a little bit bearish. Does this feel familiar? It is, because actually a lot of the majors were showing something very similar. They're going one way on the daily and looking bullish, for example, or bearish on the daily, and looking the opposite on the weekly. Okay, but here within the monthly, we could potentially head up towards these previous highs, back up towards 1.63. So that one being of interest to me. Now with the yen crosses, so the reason I've kept these up here more as a general commentary on the yen pairs, a lot of them have produced quite strong rejection candles to the upside, so bullish, in other words, on the weekly, and also some of them have obviously monthly uptrends, and so therefore there is again that possibility that they're going to push higher this weekend. So what I'll be looking for this week, I'll be leaning towards moves to the upside on the yen crosses. Let's have a look at CAD yen, for example. Really strong rejection of these lows. That's a really bullish candle. We haven't had anything like that in a while, so that's quite a bullish candle, and that's supporting that a bullish monthly candle here as well that's forming at any rate. So We haven't broken the previous highs, but if we do certainly break those highs and as we go up, I'll be leaning towards looking for short-term opportunities to the upside on those, because that's an unusual rejection of the lows. I'll just jump here to Aussie Yen so I can point out the similarities here. Again, this is a bullish indecision candle that's formed above that 81 level. And of course, it means that the next one can continue down. So that is possible this week we could hit lower. The daily has come back into the previous market structure, and therefore bearish candle here could hint at a turning point. So this is not how it's normally supposed to be. There should at least be some correlation between the weekly charts, if nothing else, between the weekly charts and the daily, or at least some excuse me, some clear leaning with these charts, which way they're more likely to go than others. But right now, a lot of these charts are offering clearly conflicting signals or messages or narratives between the daily and the weekly and the monthly. So if you are struggling, or if this is something that's kind of in your head a bit, then that is a good explanation as to why. Okay, so let's have a look. EuroCAD. So EuroCAD has pulled back into this range instead of finding some sort of support in this area. So it could possibly produce a bullish candle, but this collectively is a strong rejection of that 1.51 level, and it looks like a very bearish candle on that weekly. So my initial inclinations, if we break the low of last week, is to head a little bit lower, could potentially find ourselves ranging and therefore continuing to the downside. So as bullish as that was, it was nice to see it break out of that. The fact that it's come back into that is a little bit dangerous, a little bit of a concern there. Kiwi CAD as well, similar type of message here, which is why I've kept both of these up, similar to the yen pairs. Displaying a similar type of signal or behavior. The CAD crosses as well, doing some of that. Broken to the upside here, but also producing sort of slightly more bearish candles here. However, this one I'm more inclined to see, because it's formed such a strong support base here, that it might attempt to push a little bit higher again. I guess what I'm saying is I'm prepared for the fact that the markets could swing in different directions this week, either at the beginning or at the start, and then change direction halfway through. And then moving on to Pound Aussie. So Pound Aussie has continued to trend higher. I'm just looking at the tops of price action here, but a little bit on that volatile. It looks great on the monthly. A really nice solid breakthrough of 18509. Last week I spoke about it breaking higher, continuing up to 1.9. That is still my expectation. It's just a little bit more volatile on those lower time frames, but it is still leaning bullish more than anything else. And then Aussie Kiwi, still continuing to the downside here. Really next big level is 1.05, so there may well be some shorting opportunities, but also again a little bit of spikiness in here. A lot of this, not really a surprise given the entire kind of temperament of the market at the moment. And finishing off on Aussie Swissy, which has pulled back in again into previous market structure, produced a nice little bearish bearish candle, inside candle there that I quite like the look of that. And again, a little bit of a bullish rejection of the lows here, but this one I quite like the look of. So I think first on my watch list of this so far out of all of these will be Aussie Swissy to the downside. So last week in terms of trading, Monday was my most profitable day, closing out some good trades right out the gate. 7 a.m. on Monday, and closing out trades from the previous week really bullishly. And then the rest of the week for me was actually flat. I had some losing trades, and then I managed to make up some of those and finish relatively flat on my Tuesday through to Friday trades. And that really to me sums up a lot of what I'm seeing in the markets at the moment. So this week, it's not to say that the mood can't change throughout the week, but just explaining that I don't trust the markets at the moment when they produce what should be an obvious trade to the downside. I don't trust them to completely follow through on that, which is another reason why I'm always taking profit at 1-to-1, because often the markets will hit 1-to-1, and if they do reverse, they still manage to at least get you to break even before anything else. Okay, moving on to precious metals, starting off with gold. This is still a mess. I still don't really see too much benefit or too many benefits in terms of trading this. I can see there's lots of buyers below here. You can see pushing back up, trying to keep price above that 1800 level. It's formed, nice little doji there, and we've broken the low there, so we've got a swing high here with an indecision candle. So there's a lot of, basically the story here is indecision on that weekly. On the monthly, we still got a bit of that bullish candle. I would prefer for it to close above, by the end of this week, above that 1800 level, and therefore supporting the idea of attempting to continue next month to the upside. It's really just kind of, I wanted to settle into a trend, and there's a really real possibility it's closing lower, even though the buyers are pushing it up, that if it starts to close lower here, it could find itself dropping lower by throughout the week. Looking, and I'm bringing silver in this case. Of silver broke lower this week, did a very kind of a weak retracement, and already producing a little bit of a bearish candle here. Okay, it's in a downtrend on the weekly. It has no clear trend on the monthly at this point in time. Could be leading towards a bullish breakout over, towards the end of the year. but at this point it's sort of looking a little bit weaker than it is. So again, not a big fan of these because they're not giving very clear trends. Now the good news is, and this is often when they always say sell in May and go away, is because that can be a situation where trends tend to evaporate throughout the summer, especially in the northern hemisphere where most folks are taking some time off and the markets can go into a bit of a coma. Of course, you can get some good trends during that period, but it might in hindsight, we might look back sort of around about September when if the markets start to move then and go, okay, well, that was potentially what it was. In the meantime, I'm just extra cautious with a lot of these. So on platinum, bearish again, solid kind of, that's actually a bearish engulfing candle in terms of the wicks and the shadows. So that looks slightly weaker. We've got here a weaker candle on that weekly, and then we've got that swing high hitting a little bit lower, and it's back down into these previous highs here. So just not looking as strong as it's. If it was inherently strong, it wouldn't have behaved this way. It wouldn't have produced a lower high this week. So again, caution on those. Copper being a little bit messy as well, breaks to the downside and then reverses and completely goes to the outside, producing a bullish engulfing bar, which looks really nice and bullish. The implication here being that it wants to continue on high. It's got to get through these previous lows here to see if there's any potential resistance. So if I just go ahead and mark that, in fact I'll do it on this chart as well, just put that in there and just see if we can get past that. If we can break through that, then I would expect it to start heading up towards its old highs. That's a nice little bullish inside candle. Hasn't really corrected enough in my opinion, but these days, forget about it. The markets will just do whatever they do. So we'll see what happens. So then having a look at crude oils, moving on to crude oils here. Again, very strong rejection right off these old levels, really strong levels, bullish candles here, quite long, big bullish candles, a little bit of indecision there in the monthly, excuse me. And so this certainly to me, it is in a downtrend still on the daily, but I think based off that bullish behavior, that sharp recovery, what I'd like to see is, can it make it back up to 75 this week? Is it going to fail to do it? So I know there's a little attempt. It wants to. The signal here is that, it's kind of come back in. It's hungry for more. It wants to try again. And now can it succeed? Because really, although what it's really saying is lots of buys here, but are there enough up here to keep it going? So that's what I'll be doing. I'm certainly now leaning to the upside, but keeping an eye out. So if there's some strong rejections up here, there could possibly be a move back down to the downside, but this price action from last week certainly implies the market is keen to see if it can carry on and go on a little bit higher. So we'll see. If it does give it back this week, so as the market starts to just keeps coming and giving back here, then that would imply from the end of next week onwards, or potentially for August, potentially that market's going to head back down towards 60. So that's what I'll be keeping an eye on there. Okay, now moving on to the global indices, starting off with the Dow out of the US. Also similar to, not a surprise that there's a lot of correlation between crude and the indices at the moment, certainly this year. When we've had really big sell-offs in the markets, we've seen it across crude as well. Okay, it could just be something as simple as money in the markets just kind of, just taking it out. So here, very strong recovery, bounce right back up, testing new highs already. Fantastic. Again, I'm just going to mention here, we still haven't actually broken out through this 35,000 level. We haven't. That's a really bullish candle. That looks good. And so the message here, price action looks as though it wants to try. It wants to try and break through, wants to try and close higher. That's a really strong recovery. So we're not really kind of just there yet. And so actually what I'll be looking for this week, plan A for me would be a break above this level, retest of this, and a continuation to the upside. If it fails to do that, or there's a strong rejection of this and it starts to hit a little bit lower, then I might be looking for moves to the downside. It's not really looking super weak in the price action. It's just its collective tripping up behavior. So moving on, have a look at the S&P 500. Beautiful, closed right up, brand new highs again, solid bullish candle. And also what I love about this is the fact that it just came back, retested the old market highs and pushed right up off that, and that monthly candle very nice and bullish. So no signs of weakness there, and a straight continuation. This behavior. So when I was talking just a few minutes ago saying how the currency markets are kind of a bit all over the place and mixing up their messages, this really didn't. This was a beautiful break and a retest of this level of the previous highs and a continuation. Just very keen to carry on from that point onwards. So again, lots of signs of strength this week. So last week I was looking for that potential correction, and that's where Monday came in. So Monday had a really nice sell-off. That was where it was a good day. I think it was 3%. Whereas now, and actually some of that included positions from Friday through, and then the rest of the week, the market continued to climb a lot higher. Nasdaq as well, same thing, pull back in immediately took right off, closed higher. That's a bullish engulfing candle. That's really nice. And that's a solid bullish monthly candle. So this looking to continue onwards. Really nice and strong. There's a couple of things happening in the US, for example, tax credits for children. That's also going to help lighten the load in terms of any kind of economic strain or financial strain families are taking. There's now more of a message of get vaccinated, because now it turns out 99 point, the number varies whether it's 0.2, 0.4, 0.7, but 99% of the unvaccinated are effectively the only ones getting nailed by the remaining kind of by the Delta variants and a few others. And so really that portion of the population, which is now sitting about 30% of the overall population. And you can see the numbers starting to change. More and more people are now finally starting to get vaccinated, but there's no doubt there will be a portion of that won't. My point in bringing that up is that there is still optimism, and therefore the markets we are getting some cash coming into the markets, a lot of stimulus in that respect, and there's just additional stimulus that's effectively just dropped, and so people are starting to feel that. In fact, there's a new stimulus package on the table in terms of 3 something trillion. I beg your pardon, I can't remember what the second. I'm just blanking on it right now. So there's a lot of stimulus going on, and therefore this might not be the same around the world, but certainly does explain why the big moves in the US, where that's coming from. There's a lot of that now. The Russell 2000, which had finally kind of dropped back, did manage to just dip below these levels. It's pulled back up. It's produced back into these previous lows, is now producing a bit of a bearish candle, starting to produce a swing high there. That is struggling a little bit, might come back down, test the levels of support. I'll see then if they then rebound from that. That's a bit more of a bullish candle. So look at these reactions here. That's a little bit more bullish. I mean, it's not bad, but it definitely started to slip down considering we closed all that way down, and this candle not looking exactly the same. So yes, I think it's fair to say here, based off this, usually in isolation, that I wouldn't be surprised if this actually closed a little bit lower. So that will be interesting to me, that if the Russell is still continuing to close low, what that means for the US markets. Even here, looking at the FTSE, man, bullish candle here, nice little sell-off there. So I like this. It's gone almost nowhere from kind of beginning of May, sell in May, go away, up until now, starting and then producing that bullish candle. Okay, although we have now produced that swing high on the monthly, which usually typically would be a break of those and then continue down. Yeah, that's interesting to me. So it will be especially telling if this coming week the markets fail to break higher and instead actually drop lower, because what that would mean then is that the buyers are having that last hurrah and there's just no follow through on that. But I'm noting that I'm observing there's a downtrend here. So we're still on a downtrend, but I am noticing that looks really bullish. I want to see if there's any breaks above the high, but there's still a bit of a danger zone. Danger zone. So having a look at the DAX. All right, also strong bullish candle, really. But again, you've seen this here. You've seen on these charts where you get these bullish candles right at the end of a move, and that's just the buyers they're there, but there's just no one to keep it going. And that does eventually happen. That's why every market ultimately has that correction, because there are buyers stepping in, but eventually there's no buyers at prices. It just gets too expensive above a certain level. Anyway, so looking at that, again, I still want to see us break through these levels of resistance. I'm seeing it on a couple of the US ones, not seeing it through the others. I'm still extra cautious here, but there's no doubt. I mean, that's solid bullish recovery. And in fact, the most bullish candles that we've had in these markets in, a couple of, maybe a month or two. So just noting that, I wouldn't be surprised again for some of these to retest these levels and looking for buy opportunities to the upside. The Nikkei hitting lower, coming back down into the moving averages. So both the Nikkei and the Russell 2000 hitting a little bit lower. So that's interesting. Not all markets kind of doing the same thing. And yet I think to get a really bullish candle on the FTSE is a sign of that potential bullishness. Finishing lastly on the ASX out of Australia, closing up almost right near those alt highs. Beautiful, again, coming back down, bouncing off that level, 7,200. Nice little bullish candle. Those monthlies look really good. So it's definitely, these are bullish signals where there are certainly buyers below these levels. I need to see if the buyers can keep it above here. So in other words, we really haven't actually, in a lot of these, we haven't gone anywhere new. We dropped down and we came back up. We've stayed within that range, haven't really changed much in most of these. In a couple of them, we've pushed on to new highs. Okay, now, moving on to my equity stocks of interest. Started with American Express. A little bit of a sell-off in terms of that on the Monday. Hit a gap down, closed that gap up, and then pushed up and then sold down. So broke to new highs technically, but really not a great kind of thing. Gapped up, as I said, and then came down, closed down to the lows. Nice little bullish candle here, but it is also engulfing. Okay, just doesn't necessarily mean that's a win per se. So again, I want to see how that goes. How does a candle like this, normally what's the end result of this, or how does the market subsequently react to that? Could end up finding its way hitting down a little bit lower. Arc Innovation, I'm liking that recovery. Again, I was just saying I would, again, obviously just because I'm a big fan of Kathy Wood, just like to see this head a little bit higher, but we'd have to be breaking those old highs again, or at least for the month finish up to the upside. So I'm going to be interested to see if that happens. Most of this price action looking bullish, but we are still on a downtrend on that daily, and therefore drop to the downside. If you know the indices take a dive, it's going to pull a lot of good stuff down with it, but that's just such as life. Then Berkshire Hathaway, again, did dip below this level. So I was saying last week to see if it dipped below that, but look at it, then closed above it, then the next day opened above it and pushed back. Okay, so you can see we do now have that downtrend, a confirmed downtrend on that weekly, lower highs, lower lows, and a confirmed swing high on that monthly. So looking at this, yes, if we do end up coming back down below this level, then I think we're going to start to see some weight come off that. Okay, BP PLC, this one now fell fast below that level, which we spoke about last week. That was kind of relatively nice. It's now come back into this level, looking nice and bearish. And to me, this looking almost more like it wants to go down rather than come off. But it has let off a lot of steam. That's cool. Good to see a little bit of a bullish indecision candle break above the high. This kind of potential moves to the upside, but otherwise the daily looking like it might want to head a little bit lower. Coca-Cola also letting off a little bit of steam on Monday, managing to recover, come back down and push a little bit higher. That's nice and strong. It's not an accident that it's at least that it's on the kind of amber. It's the red charts that I'm always a little bit more concerned about. Here, Exxon, similar to BP as well, is also dropped, gap down quite a bit, trying to recover, very similar to BP, also now producing those bearish candles. A lot of this hinting at wouldn't be a surprise to me, especially here if we drop back down through these lows here, started to let off a little bit of steam there. And if we did, so it's going to be, I think that's why I think next week is going to be very, very interesting, because next week we could see a number of these stocks have actually failed to recover. They've started to hit lower. Maybe some of the indices have stayed where they are, and some of them have managed to just move up a little bit. And then you're starting to see a bit of like digression between amongst the different stocks around the world, where now it's not a rising tide lifting all boats. I just find that's a possibility. GM, General Motors, back up into 57.05 and producing a swing high there, potentially trending a little bit lower. Very similar here to some of the others, BP, Coca-Cola, where they've produced that kind of started that swing high, coming back down into the moving averages. So that following nicely through on previous analysis. Morgan Chase as well. This one, confirmed downtrend on that weekly. Look at that bearish candle there, nice little from last week, breaking a little bit lower. You can see there's, again, lots of buyers here trying to prop it up, but at some point they're just slowly but surely giving away ground. And here I've highlighted this level here. We actually did gap down into that level of support. Buyers came back in and pushed back up. Okay, Morgan Stanley here managed to push higher, good for them. Excuse me. Push higher and then close a little bit to the downside, but overall that is an uptrend. That is a relatively nice engulfing bullish candle. It is kind of pretty much heading a little bit higher, so that's doing okay. Nvidia, really, really nice weekly candle. Look at that strong recovery on that weekly chart. Still overextended here, so at some point that's going to need to take a bit of a breather, but that looked really good. We've got a downtrend on that daily, so this is what I'll be looking for this week. Do we break the lows, start to come back down, break these previous lows? But that's a pretty nice bullish candle. It's a nice amount of steam it's let off there on the weekly, so that actually should be leaning to the upside, continuing a little bit higher there. PayPal, beautiful in almost every respect. Really clean, solid bounce off that. As it managed to break the high just by a hair. You can see it last sell off here, and it's managed to crawl back and get most of that back. What was the difference in here? So the high there at 309.48 and the high here at 14. Okay, so almost double that, 48.14. Anyway, not double. Okay, so let's see. But also just noting here, this high is a high, but noticing that's a lower high there, some bearish divergence there. So again, a little bit of caution there, but yeah, okay, we'll see how that, if it can manage to hold it. Royal Mail closing quite a bit lower, managing to just scrape out a little bit of a minor recovery at that point. Now back into these old lows down here, starting a full-on retracement back down towards 500, potentially a little bit lower. So there may well be a continuation of that this week. Okay, Spider producing that lower high, coming back down into these lows here on Monday, starting off gapping down off that level of support, pushing back up and starting to head down. that still looks like it might continue down. I did highlight it here on the monthly as a potential buy for me at any rate, not for you, by the way. This is not financial advice. These are just things that I'm having a look at here. But we haven't broken the high of this per se, so that would usually be my signal to get in. A break above the high that hasn't actually happened at this point. I'd like to see if that's going to happen. Same thing here with Tesla, this being usually a bullish signal here. I need to see a bit of a break of the high here. And also spoke about this last week, about this possible play out with price, where if it does end up coming back down, testing the level, maybe coming back up and producing a lower high, coming back down, it could be leading up to a breakout to the downside if that's the case. But it's early days. I need to see a lot more of that. And finishing up on Vanguard, which just solid, man, look at that solid push to the upside here. Really, again, ridiculously bullish candle. Actually, we've only kind of seen, last one here was kind of February, really bullish recovery off that, but that is actually just ridiculous in terms of how strong that is. Again, a gap down, close that gap, and then finish up higher. That's it for me. So those are looking, so far they're looking pretty much the same in terms of their individual plans carrying on from last week. Nothing that necessarily surprised me too much in all of those. Overall, if the markets are bullish, the greener ones are tending to maintain that. The redder ones are continuing to show more weakness. And so, as I said, a week from now, it's going to be very interesting to see where they are. Will they have started to split away? The weaker ones starting to head lower. The stronger ones starting to climb higher. We'll see how that goes. Moving on to the Treasuries bonds. Now, again, last week I spoke about these being good buy opportunities. So Monday, again, very big moves. So Monday was, for whatever reason, was just a really active day across the market everywhere. So in fact, almost everything that had been in my watch just triggered on Monday, first thing, right out the gates. And so it had a big move up, came in 135 rejection, pulled back, now producing some bullish candles. A little bit of a bearish rejection candle here, not super weak. This one's starting to push higher. So my point here is that there is now a clear going back to, if we start sitting around June, there's now a clear confirmed move to the upside on Treasuries that I can see. That's very similar to the Euro bubble as well, pushing higher, countering some resistance here. Pullbacks will be buying opportunities for me to get to the upside, and Euro Bunt as well, something similar across all of these. They do look to me now, and this is something that I can clearly say they are now certainly going from June and July are now bullish, which is more often than not coincided by a drop-off in equities. Okay, that is just kind of a general, loosely applied, universal inverse correlation, but I'm finding it's clearly that they're trending higher, and there's no surprise the markets did let off a little bit of steam. The real question is this just a temporary correlation, or is this a signal of things to come for the next few months? And the only reason I would lean towards the second one is that most of the last couple of years, there really hasn't been much happening in the bond markets per se, whereas now suddenly in the last 2 months, there is a bit of a move to the upside, and that usually would hint at some weakness. And so that is going to, again, although price action is bullish on a lot of these stocks, a lot of these indices, these have continued to be bullish as well. And so at some point, somebody's going to win out. All right, so wrapping up on the cryptos. So I spoke last week about cryptos heading down towards 30,000, closing lower with their break through it, managed to recover and climb back up, starting to break these old highs here. That's a nice little bullish candle. So 30,000 may well hold. That's not a bad sign, especially if the end of the month closes as a bullish candle. This could then potentially signal that cryptos are now, or at least Bitcoin, if nothing else, is getting ready to resume its uptrend to the upside. So what I would need to see this week is a move higher, closing higher over the next week, breaking some of these highs here. And any pullbacks and moves to the upside could be potential buy opportunities. It's still within a range, in my opinion. So that's why the risk of it buying a pullback means it could just be continuing down. So we'll see how that goes. If it just closes lower by the end of the week, then it's going to test 30,000 again. And then at that point, 20,000 is then back on the table. Looking at Ethereum, good recoveries for the most part, and actually looking nice and bullish. The indicators, momentum indicators are nice and bullish. Price action, finding some good, strong support. In fact, I think that's worthwhile highlighting that. Really nice to see that happening. And again, this bullish reaction off this 2,000 level, price action just staying above that, or at least off if we wanted to go and put it on 1,700 or 1,750. Cardano, okay, so pullback in here. This could be a potential sell signal to the downside. So again, you could just, lots of people wanting to get into cryptos, lots of buyers over there. You can see it very much on that monthly basis. as well. But I'd be interested to see if we close back down towards these levels. Again, if most of these end up heading back down and closing near the lows by the end of the week, the implication is that this move to the downside is not complete yet. If we do have a sell-off in equities and commodities such as oil, we could also see that happen in cryptos. That's happened before. Again, here also Dogecoin back down near the lows. I said it's coming back into these moving averages, but also there's a potential level of support. Nice little spinning top here, and therefore it could be finding a bit of a low. So basically looking at these, let's have another finish off with Neo. Neo back down, just broke to a fresh low there. It certainly is now in an area where I think it's done enough. It can now kind of start to move up. This is starting to look a little bit more bullish in terms of the divergence on the indicators. So looking at cryptos, yes, I think they're in an area now where if the buyers are going to come back in, it would be perfectly acceptable. So in other words, we could potentially finish July with a bullish, maybe not even necessarily a bullish monthly candle, but a bullish weekly candle could be a good sign. And that would be the basis, I guess, for the possibility of them then starting to recover and starting to head higher. Should they, however, close to the downside, that then implies to me, then we may not be finished with the cryptos at all. We could find, if we are going to start, especially on, especially if we go back on to Bitcoin, if we start to break below that level. Oh, let's have a look. We've got one more as well. I got Ripple, but on Bitcoin, if we start to break below that 30,000 level, we could then, if we start to close below the 30,000 level, we could be going all the way down 20,000, and cryptos then have much more weight to shed. So it's one of those things where I don't want to get in until it's clear that the buyers, the bulls, are starting to take control again. All right, and that still would be at the lows. And again, also going to be interesting. We've got a swing high here on Ripple. Is it going to come back down towards these lows again and close down? But it is starting to look more and more bullish. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards it actually closing higher than closing lower. I'm starting to see some signs of bulls coming back into these markets. There we go. Ladies and gents, I wish you nothing but the best this coming week. Hopefully you get the best weather wherever you are. And so happy trading.